everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. And today we are diving into something powerful, future proofing your career from the inside out, and I'm thrilled to welcome Emma, the founder of Conscious Success and the master coach who has transformed her own path from tech executive to helping women, just like you listeners, find fulfillment without sacrificing success. So, whether you're navigating change, seeking purpose, or ready to redefine what success means to you, our conversation today will help you find practical tools and to build resilience and clarity. Emma, welcome. So good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so glad to be here and with your audience. I love the conversations that you have. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. These are the kinds of conversations I think that truly do matter. And I love the title or the name, I should say, of your company, Conscious Success, big, as many of our listeners know, into mindfulness and intentionality. And those who go and check out your website and learn more about you as a coach and your philosophies, a lot of that built into what you practice and how you coach. And I would love for our listeners to hear more about your background and how you got to this point because you went from making seven figures by 28. That's no small feat in tech,
hmm
but you chose to pivot. What was that moment that made you realize that you were climbing someone else's mountain and that you needed to kind of turn around and reset the path?
Yeah. Well, from a very early age, I was your typical high achieving, good girl, straight A's, checking the boxes, following the shoulds, pursuing, as I like to call it now, conventional success.
Hmm.
And I, climbed the corporate ladder at breakneck speed and I, kept getting the promotions and I was making a lot of money. And externally, it looked so good, right? Like it
Right.
looked
On
like I was
paper.
the picture of success on paper, and internally it just felt I was miserable. And I, just remember feeling like I can't even think about a 5-year plan, what I want from here, because how am I even going to make it to next month? Like, I'm so stressed out. I'm so burnt out. I feel just trapped. And I couldn't give myself permission to slow down or to even really think about, what else I would want to do. It didn't come until I actually went to my hairdresser, and it was about 3 months before my wedding, and she told me I'd lost about a third of my hair since I'd
Oh,
seen her
wow.
last. And it was only then, call me vain, but it was only when my hair started falling out that I actually took it seriously. And there's a saying I like, that the universe can wake you up either by a tap on the shoulder or a 2x4 to the head.
Mm,
And it took the 2x4 for me to be like, okay, if it is manifesting in physical symptoms like this, like
mhm.
something has to change. Like, how could this
Yeah.
possibly be success if it feels this bad on the inside? And that was really the start of my journey personally to redefine success for myself and then redesign it in my own career. And now that's what I do professionally with my clients.
That's amazing. And I think I'm sure that so many people that are listening right now, I know a lot of the women within our Together Digital community fit that bill of being like hardworking and ambitious, and they want the salary and the title. And oftentimes, when you're in that space and it's just like your head down, like that mountain analogy, right? And you're just like climbing, climbing, climbing. It's so hard to look up around you and realize and be in your body and feel
Mm-hmm.
anything. Right? And for me,
Mm-hmm.
when I was climbing, it was, I just was numb,
Yeah.
ask me how I was feeling and I'm fine, 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 because I felt nothing. And
Yeah.
I think, for you to kind of not even know in the moment that you were having that much stress to the point and anxiety that it was causing your hair to fall out, like those types of things that it's like actually causing physical ailments. How many of us are living in that way and in that space? And like oftentimes we just don't realize it. I started seeing a cardiologist a few years back, just for low blood pressure, something mild, but like his big MO was really all about how like stress is a bigger killer, and drain on our heart than smoking and
Yeah.
drinking and so many other things. And we just don't talk about that enough. So, all
Yeah.
things aside, outside of the career climb, nothing wrong with finding and defining success and going for what you want. But at the same time, it's like shaping that, looking at that and really realizing what is the cost. But then also, as we're going to talk about here, um, making sure that you're climbing the right mountains and climbing for the right reasons. But before we get to that, now that you have made this pivot into coaching, which is super awesome. I love that you taken what you've learned and kind of your experience and going from your hair falling out to now coaching and supporting other women. How has your background in tech and as a tech executive influenced your coaching with women in corporate leadership?
Yeah, I mean, so much so, both, because I can relate in my own personal journey, but also I
Hmm.
think what's so prevalent, which we don't talk enough about, is that so many of the most high achieving people are actually really driven by toxic shame. And I see
Yeah.
this in so many of my corporate clients who are in these
Mm,
positions of leadership, that are in these positions that are, conventionally successful. But at the bottom of it, a lot of people were understood growing up from like a sense of conditional love, conditional approval, that in order
mm,
to belong, in order to be worthy, they needed to be perfect. They needed to be the best. They needed to be the highest achiever. And so, what that does is, from a very young age, we think, I am only good enough. I am only lovable when I
mm,
achieve, right? And so that drives us our whole life. I know personally it really did for me. And anytime we feel that we are not the best, that we're not perfect,
right.
we start having a dysregulated nervous system. We go into a survival state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we get stuck there and we start living there. And that wreaks havoc on our nervous system. And I think so don't understand what's actually driving them is fear. It's not love. It's not desire. It's not alignment. And that is a really huge problem with high achieving people. And so I think that as I work with the clients that I do, it's helping them to move out of this toxic shame and reconnect with their humanity and their
Mm,
humanness. And to be human means to be flawed. It means to be imperfect. No one is superhuman. No one is God. No one is infallible,
yeah.
right? And so just start to give ourselves that permission again. And when we do that, we can regulate our nervous system. And
Hmm.
once we're regulated, we actually have access to our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all of the creativity, all of the type of collaboration and decision making that we actually need to be able to tap into to be our most successful selves. And so then being able to, from a regulated nervous system, reapproach success from a different place, from
Hmm.
love and desire and inspiration and creativity rather than fear. It's the biggest shift. And then you can actually feel easeful and energized rather than kind of on that like edge and stress and always feeling like you're one wrong step from it all coming crumbling down around you.
Right. That must be such a hard I say this as like somebody who knows exactly what it feels like to be in that cycle and in that space. What advice do you have for folks to kind of step outside of that when that feels like that's your whole life and cycle, right? You walk in to a physical environment where it's like high stress, high performance, at work, and then maybe you come at home and it's like a very much a demanding space. So like where do you go? How do you find that kind of restitude or time for reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just has to become a conscious choice where you're like, this matters. This is important. I think, especially as women, we put that last, like time for
Mm.
self. Who has time for that? Right. Like we're
Yeah.
putting everyone else's needs and priorities above our own, from work to family to friends, whatnot. And so I think that kind of where we started this conversation, recognizing that this isn't just like desire and fulfillment. This is like my health, my actual
Mhm.
stress in my body. And we need to learn how to tap into our body, how to regulate our nervous systems, how to bring ourselves back to that kind of like equilibrium, that rest
Mhm.
and digest state, so that we can um, not have autoimmune disorders, not lose
Right.
our hair, not
Yeah.
be feel miserable, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that oftentimes having, and this is what a lot of my clients, having a coach where you're like, wow, I have to keep this hour at least accountable to
Right.
be able to work with someone. But if that's not available to you, really carving out and putting that time in where you can journal, where you can tap into your body, where you can really just reconnect with self and
Mhm.
start to shift out of those patterns where when we're in
Right.
it, we can't see it. We need that spaciousness.
Exactly. I think awareness is absolutely key too, right? To just even
Mhm.
acknowledge when you're in that moment or when you fall back into or you go into that cycle. And what are those environments? What are those moments? What are those triggers that just put you right back into it, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes it's like really hard to even know that you're there. Because I wanted to talk next about
100%.
clinical burnout. It's a critical part of conscious success, and it's
Mhm.
obviously a big journey. What is one of the most common misconceptions? Because we talk about burnout a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
But what is one of the most common misconceptions about burnout that you encounter?
Yeah, so I speak a lot at various companies like Google and Stripe and Twilio, MindBody, just some of these on this topic of burnout.
Hmm.
And I ask in these talks, like, okay, what do you think is the main cause of burnout? And oftentimes, what people are saying are things like workload, parenting, working too many hours, not taking enough vacations. And all of these are examples of what I call stressors, but they're not stress. And there's a differentiation between stressors and stress. Stressors are things that are happening kind of in your external world that can cause stress, but stress
Mm,
is actually a very personal, individual experience, what's happening in your own body. And
yeah.
so two people will experience the exact same stressor in
Hmm.
very different ways and have very different levels of stress. So, an example of this, I have, one of my clients, very high achieving. She, is the type of person, perfect SAT score, went to Stanford, like doing everything great, has always gotten a lot of feedback and a lot of external validation from every manager she's ever had, right? And
Yeah.
that makes her feel really good. Well, she took a job as a leadership role in a high, fast growing startup and was reporting directly into the CEO. Now, the CEO was super busy. He didn't have a lot of time to spend with her. And so she was given a lot of, freedom to move at, make decisions and do what she saw best for the business. But he wasn't giving her a lot of that like constant validation and feedback because she was in
Right.
a leadership level. That wasn't really the expectation. And that led to a high level of stress for her, right? Because that
Mm.
felt like a threat. And
Uh-huh.
so, whereas to someone, that stressor of like not hearing much from your manager might not be stressful at all. For
Sure.
her, that was a huge amount of stress. So that's just one example of how the same stressor can really be felt very differently. And so, really, with this, it's actually looking at what are the triggers? What are the things that cause stress in my own nervous system? And how do I begin to bring that conscious awareness to it? And how do I begin to regulate through that? And
Mm.
that can really shift us out of burnout. And it's
Yeah.
so different, it's so personal for each
Hmm.
individual. And I think burnout really comes down to three factors, which I'm happy to dive into in more
Yeah.
detail.
Let's.
Okay, great. So, first is on the mindset level. So, with this, it's what are the expectations I'm holding of myself? Who do I think that I should be in order to be successful, in order to be worthy, in order to belong? And the bigger the delta between the expectations we're holding consciously or subconsciously of who we think we need to be and who we believe we inherently are, the more stress that we're going to feel. And so an
Ah.
example of this is, in my past career in, tech leadership, I was surrounded by a lot of um, highly intellectual men. Showing my emotions was not
Yeah.
approved of. It was expected that I was going to work in a very like linear fashion, the same amount every day. And that was misaligned with my authentic ways of
Yeah.
working and my authentic being, but I thought that's how I needed to be in order to succeed, right? And
Mm.
so that led me to always making myself wrong and feeling a big amount of stress. So that mindset piece and starting to understand like who we authentically are and how can we find success by living into that and allowing that to be okay, right?
Yep.
Rather than making ourselves wrong. What are the expectations that we're holding of ourselves? And how can we actually consciously choose what we want to believe that is going to
Hmm.
be more supportive? So that's the mindset level. Two is on the somatic level, and soma just means body. So this is like work of the body and of the nervous system. And so on the somatic level, it's is our nervous system regulated, meaning we feel safe, we feel worthy, we feel like we belong, or is it really dysregulated? And this means that we're living in that survival state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? And so really on this level, it's understanding what causes us to go into that survival state.
Mhm.
And a lot of this has historical roots. It comes, from decades back in our childhood and when we were kind of learning how to stay safe in the world, who we needed to be. I know for me personally, and this took years of personal development work for this memory to come back to me, but I had a memory and experience when I was in fifth grade. I tested to get into the gifted and talented program at school,
Mhm.
and I didn't test highly enough to get in. And both of my parents went to Harvard Business School. My brother tested, easily
Yeah.
got in. And when my parents got the notice that I didn't make it in, they were like shocked. And I
Mm.
remember seeing their faces and that like look
Aw.
of disappointment for my little 10-year-old self. I felt like, oh my gosh, in order to belong in my family, I have to be smart and I'm not smart. So
Mm.
I don't belong. And at that point, at age of 10, the best strategy I knew how to earn my belonging was to work really hard and try to achieve and to fool everyone into thinking I was smart.
Right.
And that played out for decades until I
Mm.
did this work. So anytime I thought, uh-oh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not going to hit my quota, or I'm going to be outed in some way,
Mhm.
boom, dysregulated nervous system, boom, fight or flight. So
Right.
play that out in a tech sales role where I'm constantly
Right.
facing a number every quarter. That
Uh-huh.
did a number. So really starting to understand what is our personal, what are our traumas, what are our unprocessed emotions, what were the experiences that are really causing us to go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state. And that's again super personal. But when we can bring compassion to that and we can regulate through that and we can shift out of it, that is huge. And then the last one, which I think a lot of people don't realize, is that when we are not working in our genius, when we're not working in our
Mhm.
gifts, when we're not doing what lights us up,
Right.
we just feel drained. So you could
Yep.
have a really strong mindset. You could have processed or just not have a lot of trauma. You don't have a dysregulated nervous system. But if you're not doing things you love,
Yep.
and you might be really highly compensated and really good at your work, but if it doesn't give you energy at the end of the day, you're going to feel drained. And if
Yep.
you don't shift enough of your workloads into the things that you do love, that do light you up and do energize you,
Mhm.
it's only a matter of time until you're going to burn out, because it's essentially like you're driving a car, you're pushing it around on neutral rather than going to the gas station and filling up your tank. And what
Yeah.
fills up your tank is doing things that you love, right? Things
Mhm.
that are in your zone of genius. And so I think that's also something that a lot of people miss. So I work on all three levels with
Love
my
it.
clients so that we can really shift them into
Mhm.
more aligned conscious success.
I love all of that. And I think all of this aligns so nicely, Emma, with our topic today of future proofing your career. And if any of you were kind of like, I don't know how this all relates, totally can, because I sit in so many conversations, and I know you do too, Emma, with women that, are trying to work for longevity or success or satisfaction in
Mhm.
their career, right? And a part of future proofing your career is all about, finding a longevity and alignment and resilience throughout that. And a lot of it, you need what you're talking about is creating an amount of self-awareness so that you can be a self-advocate. So for your example, one of the best things I ever learned from a company I worked for was when they asked me, "What's your love language?" And I'm like, "Why the
Mhm.
hell do you want to know that about me? That seems weird." But it helped them know, do I need words of affirmation? Do I want to be financially rewarded? Are gifts the thing? Like, what is it about me as a person in which I receive accolades and affirmation? That's why they wanted to know my love language. And I just thought that
Mhm.
was brilliant. And so now when I'm talking to my team, I want to know, what's your love language? I want to know, how do they receive appreciation, love, and affirmation?
Mhm.
Because that's important. Because some people don't need to necessarily be told thanks for doing what you do, but other people are starved for that. And it's such a simple, simple thing. But it also, if you've done the work and you're self aware and you know this, if you have a boss that isn't so, you can be like, hey, listen, I know this might not be your nature, but I really appreciate it when people say thank you. you know, I
Mhm.
really like it when a boss says, I see what you did there. Thanks. Or even just a simple thank you after an email when I've delivered a major deliverable instead of just
Mhm.
not even replying. Right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes something as
Yeah.
small as that can be a huge differentiator that fills you back up and that energizes you to keep coming back. Right?
Definitely. And I would also say in terms of being able to future proof your career and have conversations with your manager, your leadership,
Mhm.
starting to uncover what's in your zone of genius. Like what are you
Yes.
innately talented at that
Mhm.
energizes you that if you do more of, like not only again is it going to fill your energetic tank and you're going to love it, but
Yep.
because you love it, you're going to do it consistently. You're going to stay
Mhm.
with it. And the more you do something, the more you build mastery in it. The more
Yep.
you build mastery, the more you build differentiation. And the more you build differentiation, the more highly compensated you can be. And so it's actually this
Absolutely.
like virtuous cycle. And so
Mhm.
doing the work to identify that and then actually sharing that with your manager, for example, and saying, hey, I know that this is a part of my job and that's great. But what I really love, or this part of my job that I feel like I'm really excelling at and that gives me so much energy is this. How could I take on more stretch projects? How could I do
Mhm.
even more of that? And I know
Yeah.
back when I was leading a big team, when I did have those types of conversations, and I knew, like, oh my gosh, Sydney loves projects like this. I'm going to give Sydney more of this, but
Yep.
she hates this. So, what I think sometimes we fail to understand, or high achievers think, I need to shore up my weaknesses. I need to be good at everything. And they put all their
Yes.
energy into the things that they don't even like, but they're just trying to be good at everything. Versus, I'm
Mhm.
going to double down on my strengths and I'm going to build teams, high performing teams that have
Mhm.
different zones of genius so that the
Yep.
sum of our parts is, greater than the whole or whatever that
Yes.
saying is,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think that that's really important to identify your
Agree.
own zone of genius and share
Mhm.
it because that's how we can align and future
Right.
proof our career to be doing work that we really love.
Absolutely. And there's how do you not know that you're just chasing the wrong career or title? Like, and
Mhm.
why? You have one life to live, And if you're chasing the wrong, somebody else's dream, somebody else's title, I mean, I definitely wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for me, like getting into alignment and behind the passions and the things that interested me and just kind of
Yeah,
following that curiosity because that's what put opportunities in front of me to your point, right? Because when you
yeah,
speak to those passions and those interests, um, then opportunities start to arrive because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the alignment's there. People hear and
right.
see that passion and they're like, oh, here's that opportunity. And then I just have to come back to this for a moment too before you move to the next question. When you were talking about that mindset and that delta between who I should be and who I am, and that difference when you're sitting in a room full of people that are nothing like you. My God, is that not why every single woman says, I feel burnt out? Between
Totally.
how we are being shown and portrayed about how we're supposed to look and be within media and the boardroom. It's like no
Mhm.
wonder
Of course.
um, we mostly feel tired and burnt out, and why
Y-
I feel very, very privileged within our Together digital community because I constantly just get to show up and be my authentic self, creating a space for women to show up and be their authentic self to the point that I feel like I can't behave in polite society because I'm just so comfortable with myself that it's like I can work hard and people are like, God, you do so
Mhm.
much. You must be so busy and tired. And I'm like, no, no,
Yeah. And
I
that's
own
such
my
a perfect example of
Mhm.
creating conscious success and being
Yeah.
able to move through
Hmm.
your world, your life, your career easily because you're not trying to shapeshift and contort and be something
No.
that you're not. And that
Yes.
effort of trying to not be who you inherently are, that burns you out, right? And I also think it's important to
Yes.
acknowledge that like the further away we are from the like systems of power and like the model that we
Yes.
think is conventionally successful, which here in the States, it's like white, male, Christian,
Mhm.
heterosexual, like you name it. And so
Yep.
the more, the further away you are from that, you
Mhm.
are going to have more stress on your nervous system, right? Like that
Yeah.
isn't our default. And
Right.
that is difficult to deal with. And it takes a lot of um self-awareness and
Mhm.
self-worth building to be able to
Yeah.
stand in that powerfully. But I think that's why communities like this one, the one that
Mhm.
you've built and invested in, are so powerful because
Yeah.
when we can be in community and be seen by others who say, I see you, and me too,
Mhm.
me too, me too, then
Yeah.
we start to believe, oh, I'm not wrong. I'm not the problem. Maybe the system
Mhm.
is. And then that brings
Right.
awareness to how we can shift that.
100%. And like you said, that energy to wear sometimes not just one mask, but multiple layers of masks. It's mentally, emotionally, and becoming physically exhausting. And
Yep.
I do not miss that. Let's talk about our good old friend. We've checked the box on burnout. Let's go on to our next friend, perfectionism. You actually one of your the client that you mentioned, you talked a lot about her kind of like struggle with perfectionism and healing from that. I know a lot of our listeners kind of fall into that camp too. So, what is one practical tool that you share with clients that are struggling with that pattern of perfectionism?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, the high achievers who are kind of driven by toxic shame, perfectionism is that. And so when I say toxic shame, well, as humans, we wouldn't have any emotions that at some level aren't healthy and productive. So the healthy, productive reason we have the emotion of shame is to understand our limitations, understand when we need to reach out to others for support, when we
Mm.
need to know our limits so that we're not burning ourselves out. All of that is why we have that. But toxic shame is I'm either subhuman or superhuman. And so perfectionism is that superhuman end of the toxic shame spectrum. And it's this like grandiosity, I'm either perfect or I'm subhuman, right?
Right.
And so for a lot of my high achieving perfectionistic clients, it's really learning again, how do I allow for my inherent humanness? And so there's a phrase that I love to share with clients that I say to myself all the time, which is just, how human of me. So when I
Mm,
don't do something perfectly, when I make a mistake, when I sent an email with a typo, I can be like, how human of me.
yeah.
I have a lot going
Right.
on. Like I'm still okay. I'm still worthy. So just
Hmm.
that phrase, saying it to ourselves, how human of me. What it does is it actually regulates our nervous system. It moves from feeling in that survival state of, uh-oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe, to how human of me.
Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes, right? And so I really try to practice that. And I was, such a perfectionist. I'm a
Yeah.
recovering perfectionist
Uh-huh.
still, but just keeping that top of mind. And
I love that.
things like I'm a working mom, right? I work, I
Mhm.
have two young kids, and so sometimes there's going to be those thoughts that come up of like, oh, you're a shitty mom because you're working and you're not with them right now. And then it's like, oh, how human of me. Like, I need to work and I'm a
Yeah.
parent and like I can't do it all, but it just allows me to bring and meet myself with compassion. So I
Mhm.
offer that. I think that's like a huge salve to the stress that we can feel.
Absolutely. Compassion's been a big topic, and just I think it's gonna be my word of the year next year. It's been, like,
Yeah.
on repeat in my head. And I just had this epiphany last week when I was at lunch with a friend that I don't remember what she had said, but it just sparked that moment in me of, like, we can't have compassion for others until we have compassion for ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
And a lot of times, I realize this happens with judgment too. A lot of times when we spend time or we catch ourselves judging others, it's because we spend so much time judging ourselves. And oftentimes, the thing we're
100%.
judging in other people is the thing we judge harshly within ourselves.
Mhm.
And so I think for me, getting over perfectionism was really to just look at where I might have been judging harshly on others and go, how am I judging myself? And,
Mhm.
can I let that go? And the practice of non-judgment within mindfulness too is another favorite of mine. Just to kind
Mhm.
of look at that and be like, it's okay to let these things go.
Yeah.
That
And it
everything
c
doesn't have to be good or bad. Sometimes it just can be, you
Yeah,
know?
and compassion truly is, like, so critical that we learn to
Mm,
practice when we
yeah.
when we think about emotions. So, like, a dysregulated nervous system, it just means we have emotions that we don't know how to be with fully
Yeah.
and how to fully process and regulate through them. We're not allowing ourselves to feel them. We're pushing them down
Mhm.
and we're suppressing and repressing and we're
Right.
coping, and because of that, we're being really self-critical, right? And so
Uh-huh.
the only way we can actually learn to release rather than recycle emotions is by meeting those with compassion. So
Yes.
being able to be like, okay, of course you feel that way. And that makes sense. And again, like that, just that, how human of me, the I see you, that's okay. I understand. Like learning to meet ourselves there, then we
Mhm.
can actually release the emotions that we're feeling and we can move on with a regulated nervous system. We can move on clear
Yes.
headed. When we don't, we meet ourselves with self criticism. But when we judge ourselves, like nothing ever in in history has changed with
Right.
criticism and judgment. It just
Nope.
doesn't. It shifts with love and compassion. And so the
100%.
more we can apply that, it's not just some like woo woo touchy feely. It's
It
actually the
is.
most effective strategy,
It
right?
really, really is. And I also think I learned this for those of you who practice meditation. One of my favorites is the loving kindness meditation. So
Mhm.
definitely look it up, either Headspace, Calm, YouTube. And it is like a lot of times about holding space for those sad, like when I like, wake up and I'm just like, I'm sad about things. I'm sad about the world, I'm sad about whatever, or I'm angry, and I'm like holding my anger and like kind of having compassion for that emotion and allowing
Mhm.
for it. Cause like I said, my coping mechanism when I was busy and burnt out was numb. Right. Cause I was just
Mhm.
like you said, suppressing, because you have to keep going and not feel.
Mhm.
Cause then you just over emote. And then when you finally do feel it's like a
Mhm.
hot mess or it's just like not in a good way.
Yep.
So for me, loving kindness was definitely, and that meditation was a practice that really sort of helped me work through that. And I think this is a good time too to get into your work on somatic practices, because
Mhm.
how body awareness can really help us. And I think really too, this can really help you in your career and career transformation. Because I'll also throw this out there, Emma, too. I used to kind of hit that wall. We all do right at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, between like work and stress and fatigue and tired. And rather than grab a coffee, I used to like schedule myself a little huddle room and I would just do like a quick 10-minute meditation. And I felt like I had a nap.
S-
It was the
I
best
mean,
thing ever.
talk about filling up your tank, right? Like that's
Hmm.
huge. And so, yeah, what a hack. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that so many people go through their day kind of disconnected from the neck down, right? Like we're
Yeah.
just like trapped in
Heads.
our heads and yeah, we're like especially in the West, we're these like walking heads, but we're totally like disassociated from our
Yeah.
bodies. And you know, somatics, as I mentioned before, like soma means the body. So somatics is all about like bringing in the body awareness and the nervous system, the language of the nervous system is not English. It's not going to speak to you in an English sentence. It's in what we call somatic cues. So it's in the sensations that you feel in your body. So if you feel stressed, your heart rate might start to get faster. You might have sweaty palms. You might start to clench your jaw. You might feel
Yep.
fidgety. You might have a pit in your stomach. You might have a lump or a frog in your throat, right? We all know what these are. We might not have the language of somatic cues, but that's what's happening. Your body is telling you that you feel unsafe at some level. And so if we don't pay attention, we can't turn towards ourselves with compassion. We can't regulate it. And the
Hmm.
more we're just disassociated, the
Yeah.
more our body's like, I guess you didn't get the message. So I guess we're going to turn this up until you're losing a third of your hair, like I
Right.
did. Right. So it's really, really important that we start to build this awareness of our somatic cues. And each of us may experience them somewhat differently, but you can really, next time you're um, checking in or feeling a little bit of stress, do a quick body scan from like the top of your head just down to your toes slowly, almost like you have a scanner that's like going down your body, and just notice like what sensations are alive, what's kind of calling out to you.
Hmm.
And as you do that, then I really invite you to try to first name the emotion that you're feeling, because just naming it is a way of bringing compassion to it. It's seeing it, it's acknowledging it. And so you might be like, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, great. Where do you feel that in your body? And so, really, again, zoning in on that and just feeling into that sensation. And I like to just use breath. So, breathe into the sensations that you're feeling. And that's just allowing you to be really present with it. It's not the pushing down and suppressing and
Resisting.
repressing and coping and
Yeah.
resisting and distracting, right? It's just allowing yourself to be with it. And so as you do that, then you can think to yourself, ask yourself, what sound or movement would help this emotion to release? Because the thing about emotions is emotions are just energy in motion. They're sensations in and on the body. And so when we just breathe into them and then we figure out, okay, what sound or movement would this energy in motion like to be able to release? Maybe it's like I need to like flutter my lips, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I need to sigh loudly. Maybe I need to scream into a pillow. Maybe I need to have a good cry, but it's just an energy buildup that needs to move through.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
when we learn to do that, we'll feel that energy crest and that emotion subside, and then we can regulate. And so
Mm.
learning to do that, following the sensations in your body and giving yourself the space to open a release valve and move that energy through versus push it down. And maybe you're like thinking to yourself, well, if I'm in a meeting with my boss and they trigger me, I can't just like, do that right there. Great
Yeah.
point. But what you can do is at least name the emotion you're feeling internally and
Hmm.
make a date with it later. So you can
Yeah.
say, tonight at 7 p.m., once my daughters go to sleep, I'm going to take 20 minutes and I'm going to move that emotion through. And that's
Hmm.
really what I try to do. That develops really good emotional hygiene. And as we do that, that regulates our nervous system. There's a saying, we can't regulate any emotions we don't allow ourselves to feel.
Mm.
So, first we have to feel it, then we can
Yeah.
regulate. And again, on the other side of regulation is all of the ways we intend and want to feel and show up in the world. And so I think that that's something our society does us a disservice around,
Yeah.
and it's just such an important practice to really be able to feel
Yeah.
good and easeful and at peace.
I love it. I love it. And I can imagine this is probably really great though, too, for people who have maybe like anxiety about speaking or performing, right? Because there's that
Mhm.
stat that says most people are more afraid of speaking than death, you know? I
Yeah.
love it.
So knowing what triggers you and then being
Yeah.
able to, yeah, just sit in presence, be with
Mhm.
yourself. So many of us are turning
Yeah.
away from ourselves rather than turning towards.
Mhm. Yeah, and just being prepared for that, not just like mentally, but physically both. Like it's just going to help you show up that much better for your everyday as well. Like it's
Mhm.
going to help your confidence. You're going to be more present body and mind. And I think that also is another thing that kind of shows in people, right? Because we read body language like so subconsciously too. And so when people
Mhm.
are there and fully present and aware and comfortable and confident in their body, mind, and everything's aligned, it's like, oh, like they're just so comfortable and confident. And
Yeah,
where does that
you
come from?
yeah, you feel it. You really
Comes
do.
from
Like
this.
80% of communication is nonverbal, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
we can think we're fooling everyone, but if we don't
Mhm.
feel that way internally, like
Yeah.
it's going to read externally. And then
Yes,
those people who
100%.
are really magnetic and they're in their power and you're just drawn to them and they feel powerful. All of us have that capacity. That's who we are
100%.
at our authentic nature. It's just a journey of coming home to that.
Oh, I love it. I agree. I love it. I want that for all of you that are listening right now. I love this. All right. Your method combines a lot of mindset work, as we've already talked about a little bit, with strategy. What's one surprising insight about how these two elements work together?
Yeah. So, what I think, and we've touched on this a little bit, if
Yeah.
you don't do the mindset work first and you're just trying to do the strategy of like, how do
Mm,
I achieve success? Very
execute.
often, well, you're orienting to the wrong version of success. You're
Ah.
creating the definition of success from what I call your conditioned self versus your true
Mm,
self. And so you don't even know, like so many clients come to me and, I'll ask them, okay, what do you want to achieve? What are we working towards? And they lay out this like goal. And as we get into the work, it's clear that it was totally coming from their conditioned self, from their
yes.
ego, right? It's not actually what they truly desire. And so,
Uh-huh.
first, we have to do the mindset work to reconnect back to your authenticity, your truth, your innermost self. And when we get there, then you can clarify the vision and create a strategy to get there. But if we
Yeah.
don't do that mindset work, then like me, you're going to climb the wrong mountain and you're only
Yeah.
going to realize that at the top, right? And so I think
Right.
it's so important that we make the space to do the inner work too. And then
Mm.
once we apply the strategy and execute and take those steps towards it, we really get to land at conscious success versus conventional success.
I love it. I love it. And that's a great term. I'm going to start putting that out there. It's like, is this my conditioned self responding or is this my true self
Yeah.
responding? Oh,
Mhm, and
I
if you've
love it.
been living in your conditioned self for so long,
Yeah.
you might be like, "What's my true self?" Or like, "I don't even know what you're talking
Oh,
about." Well,
100%.
it's
Go
just
ahead.
an invitation, right, to start to develop that connection because I promise you that self exists in all of us. I
Yeah.
had no awareness of that self for the longest time, and now
Yeah.
that is my true north, my guiding,
Mm.
light, how I make decisions, how I
Hmm.
I coach myself through hard moments. It's all
Yeah.
of that, connection to self.
Well, that goes so nicely into the next question, too. I mean, again, coming from, structured corporate backgrounds, that can be really hard. So maybe describe for us what the role of creativity plays in
Mm.
your conscious success method for those who do come from those very conditioned, very structured environments when it's hard to kind of break from those sort of mental chains.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's funny. I so many of my clients, when I start working with them, they don't consider themselves to be creative. Like they've
Mm,
mistaken creativity with being like artistic. They're
sure.
like, oh, well, I wasn't good at painting or drawing in art class in, seventh grade. So I guess I'm not creative. And it's like, no, no, no. We're all creative. To be
Yes.
human means to be creative.
Mhm.
And especially as women, we're the most creative force on the planet. We create life,
Yeah.
right? And so creativity is our purpose. It's
Mhm.
within us, and that expression is going to look different for each of us, but we get so much energy. Again, it's a tank filler to be creative, and creativity is just like bringing something into existence that didn't exist before. And
Right.
so maybe that is like a new presentation, maybe it's a new like methodology, maybe it's a piece of writing, like maybe it's cooking something for dinner, right? But all of that is creative, and all of that really does energize and nourish us. But one of the like, in order to be creative, we need to balance the being with the doing. So, what do I mean by
Mm.
that? So many of us are just stuck in the doing. It's like we're going
Yep.
from one task to the next. We're stuck in execution. We're in go, go, go. We have no time to tune inward. We have no time for that spaciousness. And
Mhm.
in order to feel creative, we need to have some of that time for the being, where inspiration can drop in, where we can think divergently, where we have enough space to look at things from a new perspective. And then that gives us creative thought, creative energy, which we then can execute and do the doing. But so many of us have very little space for being, and we're all in the
Right.
doing. And then we don't feel creative in our jobs, and then we're getting burnt out. So
Mhm.
being able to balance that and understand the being precedes the creativity, which then can flow into the doing. And that's again conscious success. We can create tremendous success. We can be beautifully compensated and all of that, but we need to do it in a more conscious and intentional way.
I love that so much. I've mentioned this before. I think probably it's been several episodes though, but one practice I put into place a few years back, we do like we've rebranded it a little bit this year. We just launched the Eventbrite. So if you want to go check it out, Authentic
Yeah.
Ambition, Goal Setter, like workshop and cohort. And so I tasked myself, I think it was 2 years ago, with doing my own little quarterly me treat, which I even recommend
Love
doing
that.
this for somebody that's even working for somebody else. I remember talking to a guy once who was running his own startup company, was doing super well. And he was at this point where he told me the people that they gave like generous vacation time to, like 3 weeks paid vacation, and they still weren't taking he was giving them money to take vacation. He's like, I will pay you to take vacation. It was still a struggle. I'm like, what is wrong with us in America that we just, even when we have 3 weeks, we're like not taking it? So, like, one day, once a quarter, like, if you got kids, delegate. If you got a job, like, tell them in advance at the beginning of the year, once a quarter, here is my one day. Like, I am going to be taking that day off. Like, and just honestly, each quarter I did something different. Sometimes it was like reflective work and kind of like, taking like what you're saying this time. Other times it was like I took myself to the art museum and I spent like a really long time there because usually I have to like fly
Hmm.
through with my kids. And it's like a space I always want to be spending more time in, but I don't because it's always like to everybody else's time and schedule and attention span.
Hmm.
So things like that, and just kind of, or sometimes just waking up and going with my intuition and saying, this is what I feel
Yeah,
like doing because I have that freedom, which is never the case 364 days out of the year. Um,
totally.
but having that to me as just a standard practice 4 days out of the year, that's all it is, where I just give myself that autonomy and freedom has been such a gift. Highly recommend 10 out of 10. So
Yeah. And
definitely just putting that out there.
anyone can commit to 4 days out of the year, really.
Right?
And it's interesting, like this person you're talking about wanting to pay his team to take
I
vacation. And
know.
like the
It's
thing
sad.
that's at the root of that is this like dysregulation and fear. Oh, but I have so much to do and I'm going to be up behind. And what if I fail? And blah, 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 blah. So it really, that's what's in the way. And so much of,
Mhm.
when we talk about burnout, it's like not actually the external circumstances. It's how we're being with that. But then what you're
Yes.
talking about, these like me
My
treats,
me
or
treats, yeah.
yeah, me treats. It's so important. I have a practice that I love to use with clients called a desire day, which is exactly that.
Mm.
It's like from when you wake up in the morning to when you lay your head on the pillow at night, can you just follow your intuition of what you desire in that moment? And it feels
Yeah.
so stretchy for so many people, but it's like,
Hmm.
okay, what do I desire? I want to stay in bed for another 10 minutes. And then
Yes.
can you choose that and not make yourself wrong? Because that's the other
Hmm.
thing, is so many times where we're choosing something that would actually feel good and would regulate our nervous system, we're then in our head being like, but you shouldn't be doing this, which never allows us to land, which never allows us to settle. And so we don't actually get that rest. We don't feel, rejuvenated. And so being able to be
Exactly.
like, choose your choice fully. I'm going to follow this me treat or desire day, and I'm going to fully lean into that and be like, this is the only thing I need to do today, is to follow my desire, to
Mm.
pour into myself. And when you catch that little pesky voice being like, but you have so much to do, it's like, that's a tomorrow
Hmm.
problem for tomorrow.
Yes.
But today, this is
Absolutely.
what I'm choosing, and choose that fully. It's so, so important.
Yeah, it is the best gift you could give yourself. Happy holidays, y'all.
Yeah, truly. That's what I want for Christmas.
Right? You've mentioned the girls once already, so I'm gonna say, as a twin mom who's transformed your career, how do you help other women balance major life challenges, as a part of professional reinvention? Because yeah, that's a lot to
Mhm.
juggle. Not just one kid, but
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. And I think what's been so helpful for me, and what I try to, work on with my clients, is really looking at everything as a season.
Yep.
Nothing's going to last forever, but it's identifying the season that you're in and allowing yourself to consciously choose your priorities in that season. So, for example, the last trimester of my pregnancy and the first 3 months of my daughter's life, I and it took a lot of conscious thought, because it wasn't in my nature necessarily, but I
Mhm.
had to really give myself permission to fully slow down and to
Yeah.
deprioritize work and to set up the systems and the support for my business to keep going. But my priority was to uh, create new life and to
Develop your
bond with
baby,
my
yeah.
babies, right? And that's so important. And so being able to consciously choose that and be like, the season of life that I'm in right now requires slowness. It requires
Mhm.
presence. It requires me to focus my energy in this area. And again, not making myself wrong for that, but
Mm.
consciously choosing that. And because I was able to really do that, when I came back to work, I felt so rejuvenated. Felt
Yeah.
so full of creative energy. I had so much to then pour into my business. Whereas if I hadn't made that choice of that season, I think I would have just felt like I was doing
Right.
something a little bit naughty, or I was
Yeah.
failing at some level the whole time. And so I think really, yeah, identifying your season, identifying your priorities in the season, and then knowing it's going to keep shifting and you get to keep choosing. But
Mhm.
like, you can't have it all at once, right?
Right.
And so just giving ourselves permission, again, we're not superhuman. And so how do
Right.
we look at the season that we're in, and really do and choose beliefs and actions that are supportive of that?
I love it. That's such good advice. It reminds me of the quote, the bad news is nothing lasts forever. The good news is nothing lasts forever.
It's so true. It's so true. I
Oh,
feel that way, every day, basically, in parenthood, already watching how
yes.
quickly my daughters change. You're like, okay, so
Yep.
they're waking up every hour during this
Right.
developmental leap, but
Whew.
it doesn't last forever. But then also the
Yes.
beautiful moments, you're like, they're gonna go so fast.
Absolutely. Yep. Practicing and embracing impermanence. All
Yep.
right. You said it there just a moment ago too. This whole having it all, doing it all, being it all. As a coach who focuses on authentic success, how do you help clients redefine that idea of having it all?
Yeah. So really, this is a huge part of the work that we do at Conscious Success, is defining your personal definition of success and then redesigning your career to achieve that. And
Hmm.
so we spoke to this a little bit, but I differentiate between conditioned success and conventional success according to 6 vectors. Happy to go into that
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Sure.
So the first vector is the mind, and so when we're orienting towards conditioned success, or sorry, conventional success, this is all conditioned thinking. This is who I should be. This is the expectations that society holds. This is what, success looks like according to other people, but maybe not according to me,
Hmm.
versus intentional. So when we're aligning with conscious success, we're intentionally choosing, what do I believe? What is supportive for me? What do
Hmm.
I choose? Right. And again, like, we have to look at our programming, look at our paradigms, look at what we've kind of held to be true that isn't a capital T truth, and start to bring intentional thought to that so we can start to orient towards our own North Star. So that's on the mind level. On the body level, it's moving from a survival state to a flow state. So again, if we have a
Mm,
dysregulated nervous system, we're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, and we are making decisions and we're acting out of fear. We're trying to protect our life. And somebody told me this once. I wish I could credit it to the person I heard this from, but when you are trying to escape a threat, like if you're running away from a boogeyman, you don't know where you're running to. You just are
mm,
running away.
right.
Versus when we're not running away, we're moving towards desire, towards love. We can be in that flow state and we can have clarity of vision, right? And we can lean into our gifts and we can really be congruent with
Mm-hmm.
all of our faculties online and that flow state where you just feel like, oh my gosh, everything is clicking and this is feels amazing. Like that's the kind
Right.
of success that is possible when we're really regulated and aligned towards our authentic desires. The third vector is energy. And so this is really about moving from depleting energy to generative energy. And so
Mm,
when we're doing too many workloads, too many things that we should be doing, that we're highly compensated for, that we've learned how to do over time, but we don't actually get energy from, they deplete us. Again, we talked about that earlier with the burnout versus when we do the things that give us energy, that are generative, and that, when we do it, we might leave having more energy than we
yeah.
came in with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's truly possible. People,
Yeah.
I don't think I ever believed that before I actually felt what that was like. And now that is how I live and move through my
Yes.
day and career. And so really looking at that energy and being able to kind of assess what's depleting my energy and what's kind of increasing it. That's super important. The
Mm-hmm.
fourth is motivation. So, am I orienting towards external validation or towards internal fulfillment?
Mm,
And I
that's an
think this is a
important
big
one.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
so
with you,
many of us
friend.
get caught. Yeah, we're like, oh, well, this is what's going to make me look cool or pretty or successful or we're, all of that stuff. And we're abandoning our own truth, our own
Yep.
voice, our own values versus what makes me feel fulfilled. And even if others don't get it, even if others judge me for it, like
Yep.
that's what it's my life, right? And
Right.
this was a big one I had to sit with when I moved out of tech and
Yeah.
started my own coaching business. People are like,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, what? You have the dream job. Like, what are you doing? And it's like, I don't need you to understand. This is where I feel alive. This is where I feel fulfilled. And now people, really get it, having, years later seen the business that I've built. But at the time they didn't. And I had to still choose that even when
Mm-hmm.
others didn't. And that's a big one. The fifth one is alignment. And so this is all about, are you orienting towards strengthening your weaknesses or developing your strengths? And again, we talked about that earlier, but
Yeah.
rather than just trying to shore up my blind spots or the things that I'm not naturally talented at, how do I really double down on the things that I am? And anyone like in my past career, I was never naturally talented at like Excel spreadsheets, right? I was very confident, I was very good at
Sure.
it, but like I could spend all my time trying to get better at that, or I could really lean into like, what I'm really good at is I'm good at systems thinking and figuring out the problems and solving for those. So if I double down on that, I'm going to have a bigger impact, right? So
Mm-hmm.
learning how to really honor our strengths is huge. And then the last one is wealth. Are you sacrificing your values or are you honoring your values? So I'm all for, being fabulously wealthy and well compensated for our work. But if we are sacrificing our values in an endless pursuit of more money, it doesn't feel wealthy on the inside.
Right.
Versus when we make money, which
Yep.
allows us to live into our values, it allows us
Mm-hmm.
to give to the charities, it allows us to support our families, it allows us to do the work that we love, right? And
Yeah.
there is a tipping point where oftentimes we start to sacrifice our values if
Yeah.
we're just chasing an endless amount of more rather than knowing what
Right.
our enough point is. So I think by these six vectors, we can
Mm-hmm.
start to define our own definition of conscious success. And then
Love it.
once we get that clarity, we can start to reverse engineer kind of, okay, where am I? Where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? And then do the work to start to take that aligned action.
I love it. Those are great points. I love it. I know I was taking notes. I hope you were too, listeners. We're going to have a few minutes at the end too, which we're coming close to for you to ask questions. So feel free to use the chat if you have questions. We would love to hear from you. Of course, now just opened it and I'm like, everybody's like, hello. Oh, hi, Brenda. It's good to see you and hear from you. That's so great. Yes, you can ask questions. Please do. So I just now opened the chat because we've been so like into our conversation. But what you were just saying, it really made me recall the times in which um now that I'm doing the role and the work that I'm doing, I hear this like there are just times when I'll get a Slack or I'll have a conversation or I'll hear, a comment from another woman or a member and it's like cha-ching, cha-ching. That's the currency. Like sometimes currency comes in a form that's different than a paycheck. I understand
So
we need
true.
money to survive. I totally
Yeah.
get that. But at the end of the day, too, that there's just so much more value out there and currency in the world than just what goes into the bank account. I did not realize that until I was almost 40. So I'm just telling y'all now. I want you all to have that kind of job that helps fill your bank account, but then also you hear that mental cha-ching that fills your heart, your body, your soul in that way.
Mhm.
That really that's just I've never felt in any other role or any other job. So yes, please drop those questions into the chat if you have them. All right. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll go. We might be able to do two. We'll see. Maybe we can get to two more before we go to our fun little power round, unless we have questions from our listening audience. I love that you guys have been commenting. So it sounds like everybody's engaged, which is fantastic. All right. What is one practice that our listeners can start doing today to begin to reconnect with their authentic career desires?
Yeah. So I think this one on the energy vector is a really helpful way to start to connect with that. So a practice I love to give my clients is look back at the last 2 weeks of your life and write down everything that took like 15 or 30 minutes or more of your time. Like write a big list of everything on there. And that can be professional, personal, like put it all there. And then go down and next to everything that increased your energy, do a little up arrow. Next to everything that kept it totally flat, like didn't increase or decrease it, side arrow. And anything that decreased your energy, put a down arrow. And then go through and first of all, just look like roughly what percentage of time are you spending in the things that give you
Yep.
energy? What percentage are you spending in things that keep it flat? And what percentage are you spending in things that decrease your energy? Right there, if you have like 50% in
Yep.
decreasing your energy, like there's an alignment issue here,
Yep.
right? Like we got to address that. So, next to everything that's a down arrow, then what I invite my clients to do is think about how you can delete, delegate, or do differently. So, what do I mean by that? Delete is how can you stop doing it? Like maybe when you have friends over for dinner, you think you need to make like a 3-course fancy meal. And what you could do is like order in pizzas and just be like super relaxed and happy. And your friends might have a better time because you're not stressed out, right? Or you make one dish instead of three. So there's some things that you can just stop doing. It's something we're putting on ourselves, which isn't
Yes.
something that is required of us, and that
Mhm.
can shift a lot. On the delegate front, I think especially as women, so often we don't think about who can support me, who else can do this, who else could take this on. And so really stepping into that, whether that's, in our family, on our teams,
Mhm.
what might decrease your energy might be in someone else's zone of genius that increases their
Yes.
energy too. And so you're not doing anyone else necessarily a disservice by not doing the things you don't enjoy. They really might. And so that's how we again build high performing teams. So having those conversations and thinking more creatively about, okay, who else could I delegate this to? Or how could I bring on support to help? That's really powerful. And then the third one is do it differently. So some things you just have to do in your life and in your job, right? But we can choose a different way of approaching it or a different mindset to it. So, for example, maybe you need to like fill out a bunch of um, a Salesforce spreadsheet or something, but you could put in a podcast that you love, or you could take a call outside on a walk rather than just doing it at your desk. It's like you're still doing the same thing, but you're doing it in a way that feels totally different. And
Mhm.
so I challenge you for those things that you just can't delete and you can't delegate, how could you do them differently? And that can be a huge shift. And then also for the things that increase your energy, look at that. Like, how
Mhm.
can you do more of it?
Yeah.
what about those things are increasing your energy? How might you be able to flip some of the sideways arrows to up arrows if you applied that same approach to that? So just bringing that, it's such a helpful tool for awareness. And
Mhm.
I think the ideal to aim for, and most people will probably be like, I'm so far away from that, is like 80% in energy increasing. It takes time, but with conscious, empowered choice and continuing to lean more into that, it's totally possible.
Yeah, it's baby steps. I love it. I love a good energy audit. It's like such a good
Yeah.
tool. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. All right, let's go into, I don't see any questions coming from the live listening audience, but let's go into our power round questions to wrap things up. What is your go-to stress relief practice?
For me personally, it's journaling. I
Love it.
just find so much clarity by writing down the gunk that's in my head
Mm,
and slowing down enough to freehand write it onto the page. And I actually coach myself. So sometimes I'll like pose a question and then I'll answer
yeah.
it for myself too. And it's just a way of like me moving through everything and anything that's feeling kind of misaligned, getting the clarity and understanding what's the next right step or aligned action I get to take from here. It's just so important.
That's fantastic. All right. Let's see. Netflix, podcast, and I'm gonna also throw in a third one, or books for downtime.
At the end of a day, I would say it's Netflix. My husband and I
Yeah.
do, veg out together
Love
in
it.
bed and watch some
Aw,
Netflix. I love my
nice.
podcast, but that happens usually during the day when I'm a little
Right.
bit more, yeah, online.
Love it. Your most used app that surprises people.
Mm. So I use an app called Telegram to voice note and text with all my clients. And so it's just a way of like separating out all my work communications from my personal communications, but I'm in
Cool.
there all day long, sharing in their wins, coaching them through challenges, all of that. The other thing that I use a lot is an app called Notion. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's
Yes.
kind of
Oh,
a,
love
yeah,
it.
project management. And so
Yep.
I put all of my tasks, personal, otherwise, into Notion so that
Mhm.
they're not in my brain gunking that
Yes.
up and I can
Yeah.
get that energy back. So I'm always like dropping things in there and then I'll come and be like, okay, let me put some to-do dates and deadlines and
Yeah.
organize myself. I actually have built a template and Notion that I use with a lot of my clients and give them access to that helps run your whole kind of life and business. So if anyone wants access to that, just DM me on Instagram at Conscious Success Co. and I'll send you my template. It's really helpful.
That's brilliant. I love it, love it, love it. And I love your voice coaching idea. So one of my friends who just got her coaching certification, she's my hype woman, and that's how she always texts me is through voice. And it I save them for when I need them because I
Hmm.
just I need to hear the hype. Love
Yeah,
it.
it's such a nice way to connect and really hear
Yeah.
again all of the you can hear the intonations and the
Yes.
pauses. There's so much more
Uh-huh.
that can come through there.
Absolutely. All right. And then we'll wrap up this future proofing your career podcast episode with the best career advice that you've ever received.
Oh, there's so much, but recently I've been reading Ina Garden's Be Ready When the Luck Happens, her book.
Mm,
And in it, she talks about how her husband, Jeffrey, always told her, do what you love and you'll be really great at it. And I think that that's
yeah.
just such good advice. So to do what you love, and if you love it, you're going to be really great at it. And I think that that's just so simple, but so true.
Absolutely. Emma, thank you so much
Thank
for all of
you,
this. This
Amy.
was wonderful. Thank you to our live listening audience for showing up and listening. And to all of you listeners out there, we appreciate you all so much. Next week is Thanksgiving week. So we are taking the week to just rest and be grateful. You have plenty of episodes to go back and listen to. So please take it back, listen to some of your favorite episodes, start back at the beginning, whatever tickles your fancy. There's plenty of amazing people to listen to and learn from. We appreciate you all. Thanks for joining us today. And until then, keep listening, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you all soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much, Amy.